Alan, last but not least, we're not Apple in the city region. We don't have 70 odd billion pounds in the bank. We probably don't have 75 million pounds in the bank at the moment to spend. So it's going to be tough financing all of this infrastructure. You've heard from the rest of the panel. There's some big demands out there. We have to find match funding just for £6 million worth of broadband. How are we going to achieve that? And you know, what the sort of innovative measures that we might use in terms of doing that?
Yes, I mean, it is a significant challenge, and clearly in the present severe funding constraints that are in existence, you know, that position's exacerbated. However, I mean, clearly if the LEP is going to succeed, it is going to be important to have access to investment in infrastructure, which will facilitate economic growth. I thought I would run through, and there might be a list up there, there is a list up there, run through a few things which I think you've already probably covered in some respects, but perhaps just to clarify what some of those mechanisms are that we've got either in place now or potentially in place in the near future. I mean, traditionally, local authorities have been able to borrow at relatively cheap interest rates and quite freely, as long as authorities are able to service the debt and have an income stream. And that's clearly a problem at the moment with severe constraints in our funding. Asset sales have, to a large extent, dried up in the present market conditions, and government grants have been severely cut back. So that's still, those mechanisms still there, but they are limited now. Whatever you think of private finance initiative, it has been a significant source of funding for infrastructure in recent times, with major investment in projects ranging from highways to street lighting, waste disposal facilities, schools, hospitals, and so on. Those have been subject to government bidding processes, and I suspect that it's unlikely that that's going to be a major source of funding in the near future. We've then got a sort of a range of mechanisms around the business rate, which I'll talk about. Enterprise zones, you'll be very aware of. The government have invited LEP areas to identify and establish enterprise zones. They are relatively small in scale, up to about 150 hectares. And they obviously offer rate discounts to businesses to locate in that area. But the growth in rate income that is generated will be taken outside of the mainstream local government funding regime and will be available then for LEPs to use. That income stream is guaranteed for 25 years, so that's an important security. And with that largely guaranteed income stream, that could well be an opportunity to support borrowing within the LEP area to support other infrastructure investment. Tax increment financing is one that, as the Core Cities Group, we pushed very hard for a number of years with the previous government and the present government to try and encourage governments to adopt this approach. It's one that's been quite successful in the United States in the past. In a nutshell, this is accessing future income streams, future tax revenues to invest in infrastructure, which in itself creates that growth in tax revenues. That is at the moment, there are proposals out from the government that they are consulting on, which could give us an opportunity for some fairly major transformational investments using that mechanism, if that can come to fruition. There is a more general review of local government funding, which is around the business rates, which you may well be aware of, where authorities will be enabled to retain some of the growth in the business rates that they generate locally, which is a move away from the present system where it's all pooled nationally and redistributed on a basis of need. I think it looks on the face of it to be fairly limited, but nevertheless, it is a potential new source of income. And there is a potential in there for a pooling of that revenue amongst authorities. So within a LEP region, it would be possible to look at pooling some of that extra income for the benefit of the LEP as a whole. And I think the government also envisaged that in that scenario that actually locally we could establish further enterprise zones with local incentives to create more momentum in that process. After that, we've got some relatively short-term one-off measures, community infrastructure levy and new homes bonus. The new homes bonus, of course, is equivalent to the council tax on each property in net terms that we grow, domestic properties we grow in a district, and that's retained for a 6-year period. So over time, that will build up, and after 6 years of growth, if that can happen, then that could amount to a sizable sum of money. And then finally, I think probably more complex has been local asset-backed vehicles, which has been a lot talked about, perhaps not too much action, where public sector bodies can put assets and combine assets with private sector equity through a specific vehicle to achieve economic growth in an area. And I think that's an area that needs to be explored further, and again in the context of a LEP I think could be important. So there are some mechanisms around that. They are not necessarily all going to deliver individually substantial resources, but perhaps together as a package there is something for us to go at.
That's great, thank you. I think it's also fair to say that it's going to involve other parties, particularly the private sector, in coming together and working and financing in partnership, which we already do. We already see examples of that, but that's going to be a vital part of doing that. Okay, you've heard from the panel. We've got a broad selection and backgrounds. Who would like to ask the first question? Lady at the front. The microphone's just on its way. Thank you.
Jane Lambert. Yesterday I listened to the In Business programme. There's Peter Day talking about Silicon Roundabout, which is a cluster of businesses around Old Street Underground Station, just north, I think, of Shoreditch in London, where there had been a cluster of micro-businesses, small businesses, but all based on technology, on the internet, or new technologies, I should say, which have grown exponentially. They're probably the only thing which is growing in the United Kingdom at the moment. And what I'd really like to know is what are the proposals of this panel for encouraging a Silicon Roundabout in Leeds or Bradford or Huddersfield or even Wakefield or wherever? Because I think we need one if we are going to get the sort of growth that this region needs and which this country needs.
Is that one for you, Robert?
Yeah, more than happy to answer that one. I mean, Silicon Roundabout is a fantastic example of where businesses have started and grown. I think what it demonstrates is probably that you don't pick winners, but you create the right environment. Silicon Valley grew organically. I think it's been identified, and now it's very popular to talk about. I think the danger is that you undersell what you already have within the Leeds City region. I think if you look around Leeds City region, there's some fantastic technology companies. In my previous life, I was at Yorkshire Forward working with digital industries, and I know there's some fantastic businesses here. I think what you need to do is promote them, talk about them, because that's what they do in London. They talk about these businesses. We need to make sure these businesses have the right access to finance. Very difficult to say, you, business A, are a winner, and we're going to invest in you. I think it's about how you create the right environment and let the talent that is here create the businesses. Businesses will flourish, businesses will fail. If the environment's there, it'll continue to grow. And I think we've seen that, FreeServe was in Leeds, and, that might not be any longer in Leeds, but the people who work there are, and they're doing different businesses. And that's how you get the clustering effect. And I think we need to recognise it, talk about it, promote it, and let's get Leeds businesses buying from other Leeds City region businesses. That creates an impact. It's there, look around.
I think this is a perfect example, like we talked about agglomeration, but just on a smaller scale. They're agglomerating around themselves, around a still transport, I might add, but around Silicon Roundabout. And there are fine examples. I mean, the Science Park in York, and Nicholas Spence is here today, and you know, that's doing some great things about incubating and growing small businesses, which are becoming world leading in some respects. Sorry, I'll come to you, Trevor.
Thanks, Nigel. Trevor Higgins, Regional Partnership Director for Yorkshire and the Humber. Robert mentioned there the £6 million that we've got for West Yorkshire, actually. And if you look at using that £6 million for superfast broadband, matching it with private sector funding and some more public sector funding, you can do a hell of a lot of good for the region. Julian talked earlier on about what they're already doing in North Yorkshire, and they've done some fantastic work there. My problem really with this is we're about a year behind now, in my view, West Yorkshire behind North Yorkshire. The question is really for the LEP and the LEP panel members, you know, is how do we gain that lost ground? You know, how do we get back on track? And I know we've posted an expression of interest to BD UK, but we're not actually at the bidding process yet. So I'm just frightened we're slipping behind and missing an opportunity.
Thanks, Trevor. I think just over here.
Hi, thank you. Councillor Simon Cook from Bradford. I just want to make just a brief observation about I take the point about technology clusters and all that, and we've made every effort to do that. And the interesting thing is when we look at investment priorities for the Leeds City region, the place where we've succeeded that, and Trevor knows all about it, isn't actually on that list of investment priorities. And so the Aire Valley and Keighley and Shipley, which is where the Advanced Digital Institute is, where we've succeeded in actually creating a cluster, I think, is simply ignored by the Leeds City region strategy. So one of the things we need to understand here is that this love of strategic planning and having a grand strategy with big thick blue lines on the thing actually does not address ourselves to the problems on the ground and the issues and the things that are being created by ordinary people. One of the things that strikes me more than anything about this is the way in which we assume that funds that are generated by very local activity, such as community infrastructure levy, such as new homes bonus, are actually going to be pulled and spent in some kind of grand strategic way, rather than actually spent as I believe they should be spent, to the benefit of the affected communities. And it really is very striking that in all this, we've not understood the extent to which community enterprise and community initiative are vital to actually making the economy work. So yeah, by all means, have an infrastructure strategy, but don't forget that it's as important to allow people who live in Cullingworth to get to Leeds for 7:30 in the morning rather more easily than they can now. It's in fact rather more important than for some people to be able to get to London 35 minutes quicker than they can now. And I think we need to change our priorities and actually focus on how ordinary people can get around and do their business, not on these. It's all too grand. It's all too much, and it doesn't. If we want to sell it to the public, you've got to get down onto their level and make the case, and you aren't making the case.
Thanks, Simon. John, do you want a quick response there? I mean, you're a LEP board member. There's a bit about scale. There's a little bit about where the investment priorities should be, and there's a little bit about how do you build bottom up as well as top down.
There is. There are actually all of those things, and I wouldn't disagree with the observations that have been made. I do think, though, that you have to have a strategy which encompasses the whole of the issue rather than just pieces of it, although those pieces and components are important components. And what I was talking about earlier in terms of enabling our people to go around plays precisely to your point that you've just made in how do we get people from A to B locally as part of a structure which is pan-regional. And there will always be smaller elements of that and larger elements of that. But currently, we don't have enough people, for example, using our railways around the region to connect the region together that we should have. And the reason is because it's actually quite difficult. And so that particular point, I think, has to be swept into the agenda in order to make sure that we've got the ability for people to move around easily, whether it's locally or whether it's out with and to adjacent city regions.